is the month that I wait the entire winter for. The birds are back, messily bathing in our fountain. The earth is warming, causing new growth to unfurl every day. And the days are lengthening, continuing our rapid march towards summer. This is a month of change, one of the greatest months of change of the entire year, and I just love it. The maples are uncurling their delicate new growth, ephemeral leaves that adorn their branches like ornaments. If you're lucky enough to have a big leaf maple in your yard, one of our native species here, it might be in blossom. And those blossoms you can actually eat. You can put them into pesto or even make a fritter. While I'm over here admiring this new growth on our Easter, I'm going to prune our Pieres japonica. Now our other Pieres japonica, our pink flowered one, is still in bloom, but this variegated version flowered a while ago and now all its flowers are died back. So this is the perfect time to prune a shrub like this. The same thing would apply to other spring flowering shrubs like azaleas, rhododendrons. Anything that blooms now blooms on old wood. That means that the growth it has over the summer will bloom in the spring. So you want to prune now so that way you're not cutting back next year's flowers. But before I prune this, I'm actually going to take some cuttings from it and show you how to do that. Cuttings are a great way to propagate plants that you like and get fruit plants from them. I know that we will eventually move from this house, probably to have a bigger garden. So any of the shrubs or plants that I like, I've been taking cuttings from to start new versions of the plants, and I really admire this variegated. So you want to take your secateurs or any sort of sharp pruning scissor and cut about 4 to 5 inches off of the plant. Pick somewhere that does not have flowers on it, as that's going to spend too much energy for the plant. So once you've got your nice little section of plant, you actually want to take back most of the leaves. So leaves are where transpiration happens. So that's where water is lost from and where the plant essentially breathes. The stem that you've cut back does not have roots on it. So there's actually no support there, no way for that plant to take up moisture. And you don't want it to die, you want it to create roots. So you're going to remove most of the leaves from the plant. It doesn't actually need a lot right now to support itself. I'm just going to leave this top little, I'm actually going to even cut back some of this top little growth point here. So you'll grab your pot. It's nice to use kind of a larger size pot because you'll put quite a few number of cuttings in it, and get a loose mix. Doesn't have roots on it, so it's not taking up nutrition. So I just have a soilless mix in here. It's about 50% cocoa coir and 50% perlite, but you can use what you have. We also have some rooting hormone here, which will help ensure that you get plants from your cuttings, but you really don't need it. I'm just going to use it since we have it. So you'll take it, dip your plant in it, and then you'll just pop this in on the edge of your pot, trying to go down pretty deep. So you can see that there, potted that in there, and I'm going to do that a few more times, get about 1 cutting in every corner. So once you've got all of your cuttings in your pot, put this somewhere sheltered, preferably warm and not in direct sunlight, as these are delicate. And if you see new growth coming out of the top of your cutting, you know that it worked, and you can actually pot it up and have fruit plants from your own plant. This spring has been unusual for us, as I think it has been for much of the world actually. In April, we've only received 10% of the usual rain that we get. As you may know, Portland, Oregon is known for having a pretty rainy climate, so that does not bode well for fire season this summer. It's also been pretty cool this spring, with this week being an exception, where we went from having dry, cool days to suddenly an extremely hot wave of weather. It's 78 degrees out right now on April 16th, which is pretty extraordinary. But don't get too excited yet by putting out your warm season crops. These include things like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, things that need warm soil and warm weather. We are past our frost state. In this part of Portland, we only have a 10% chance of frost after April 19th, but the soil is still a little bit cool, and we are still very much in spring. After we get this heat wave, the weather will cool down, and we won't get that super nice warm weather until a little bit later, maybe a month or so from now. So I would encourage you to instead plant some cool season crops that like our spring climate, our typical spring climate, and crops that don't need that warm weather. So here I have a celery. This is Utah green. Growing your own celery from home is great because these leaves on it are actually really tasty. You don't usually find them in the grocery store because, as you know, leaves cause transpiration, which means that the stalks will wilt in the grocery store. So they're great to have at home to put in salads and things like that. And then this is an endive. It's a frilly margin version Rhodes, which is actually a frise type of endive. It's delicious. So I'm gonna pop these in here. So when you're planting your crops, there are certain ones that want to be a little bit deeper than up to their first leaf, and ones that you want to be nice and level with the soil. So celery, I would just plant level with the soil. You can see this is a little bit root bound here. I let it go a little too long, so I'm just breaking up the roots at the bottom and then planting that in. The other thing to know about celery, and this applies to related crops like celeriac, which is grown for the basy part of the stem rather than the stalk like celery, is that they actually come from bogs or riparian areas. So you want to make sure that they never get really dry. They can't really handle it, which is why, even though this is on the south side of our house, as you can see at times it is shaded. This is a good spot to grow something like celery during the summer, since we have such hot, dry summers here in Portland, Oregon. I'm gonna pop one more guy in here. Whoop. And then the endive goes right next to it. Just doing 4 of each right now. These will get pretty good size, and I have a lot of other greens that I'll be growing. So there's plenty to go around. You notice we also have our soaker hose set up here. In May, we'll probably get this going. We also like to mulch too, but we'll do the soaker hose under the mulch. Just gonna pop that in there. And 2 more. Just gently teasing the start from the container. And then always, 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 no matter what, even if the soil feels really damp, you want to water in anything that you plant, no matter how drought tolerant it is. That is because the water helps the soil come into contact with the roots, so you're not going to have any weird air pockets there. So this celery is very slow growing. It'll be here for quite a while. I'll honestly probably leave it in here for a year to let it get pretty good size, and I'll just pick stalks off the outside as it grows. And then it starts to get kind of woody a little bit after the winter and fibrous on the inside, so then I'll refresh it again next spring with a new crop of celery. The longer days in April mean plenty of time for garden jobs. Maybe you're staking plants to prepare for upcoming growth. Or maybe you're dealing with pests that love to show up as the soil and days warm up. One of those major pests here are slugs. In the state of Oregon, we have 124 species of terrestrial mollusks, so that's snails and slugs. And of those, 22% are exotic introduced species, mostly from Europe. Those introduced species are the pests in our gardens. Most native slugs and snails eat dead plants or fungi. For example, the banana slug, one of Oregon's most famous slugs. You've maybe seen it before if you've been hiking, or maybe you found one in your yard. They're fairly large. They tend to be a yellow-green color, and they also can be spotted, hence the name banana slug. They actually are really important for the forest ecosystem. They eat dead plant material and fungi, adding to the health of the soil. The ones you see in the garden tend to be European slugs that are super invasive, and they eat living plants. That's why you'll find little holes in your plants. That's how you know slugs have been there. The markings from slugs are asymmetrical, and they tend to have little channels on them as the slug eats up on the leaf. The best way to deal with slugs, I think, is just to go out in the evening, since they come out as it gets to be dark, with a flashlight and just go pick them off your plants and kill them. It's not the most glamorous way to deal with slugs, but it really does work. Just be careful about touching slugs with your bare hands, as they can carry worms, so you want to wear gloves or pick them up with some sort of spade or something else. I also can recommend beer traps. We've used that before successfully. Just take a little cup of beer, the cheaper the better, put it in the ground, and the slugs will go towards it and drown themselves in it. We do use slug O2, which is an organic mineral that the slugs eat, and it kills them without causing harm to other animals. The best time truly to deal with slugs, though, is actually in the fall. If you get rid of them, they can't lay eggs, which then hatch this time of year. But whatever you do, just a little bit of prevention now means less to deal with as the season progresses. Another excellent crop to plant this time of year are potatoes. Potatoes can be planted in April, and in some climates even a little bit sooner, but it's definitely not too late to do it. We actually just planted some in rows up at our allotment, but we have a few potatoes left over, and I was going to show you how to grow them in a pot. Since you can really pot them up anywhere, it's super easy, even on a balcony, and you could have fresh potatoes ready to go. Which, if you've never grown potatoes in the garden, they are amazing grown at home, and they store really well. So if you want to have something to eat in the middle of winter, the darkest time of year, to remind you of summer, potatoes are your crop. Now I'm going to show you how to pot them up in here, but as a quick note, yams and sweet potatoes actually grow completely differently, both from each other and from potatoes. So just use this method for potatoes. Now, I have a seed potato here. Basically, that's just a tiny potato. This is a mid-season variety, which takes about 90 to 110 days to mature. You'll know all these shoots. Maybe you've left a potato in the back of the cabinet and grow these crazy white long snakes. That is where you get new vines from in the eyes. And that's the areas that will grow even more potatoes. So you can use a seed potato that you get from a catalog, but you could also just buy something from the grocery store, your favorite variety of potato, and plant it at home, I would just encourage you to buy organic varieties, since a lot of times conventional potatoes are actually treated with something to stop them from sprouting, since people find growth on them unseemly. So you'll just want to use organic varieties and maybe a fingerling or something smaller, as they'll mature a little bit faster. You're more likely to have success with it than some sort of huge giant potato that could take a really long time to ripen. Now, if you're using a store-bought potato, I would also encourage you to chit it. Chitting means leaving it out in the sun to get some of these growth points. So you leave it in the cabinet, it gets like long, stringy white vines that come from it. If it's in the sun, you'll get these little green nubs of growth, which this is good growth to grow more potatoes from. So just start with any bucket. You could even use a bag. If you have like an empty soil, potting soil bag, you could use that. Honestly, they're very easy to grow and kind of could even become weeds. We actually last year accidentally reused some soil that we had previously grown some potatoes in, and then found them growing in the mound behind us just randomly in the garden. So they'll definitely spread. So you just want to fill up your pot a little bit just to get a nice little base going on here. This is our homemade potting soil blend. That's 1 part cocoa coir to 1 part perlite to 2 parts compost, and then a handful of worm castings. But you could really use any potting soil blend. As always, I encourage you to go peat-free and ask for a soil blend without peat. So I use cocoa coir. It's a great alternative just because peat is a very special natural resource. When it's used in potting soil mixes, it's equivalent to clear cutting a forest. They just scrape the entire peat out and we lose huge ecosystems. So go peat free if you can. And then you're going to fill the pot partway up with soil. Take your potatoes, pop them in. This is going to be a little bit crowded in here. I'm not too worried about it. If you were going to plant this out in a field, maybe you'd want to give it 12 to 14 inches of spacing so you can get nice big potatoes. I'm going to probably eat them pretty young and don't really care about them being big. This is more just like a fun little extra for me. So I don't care if you want a larger size potato, space them out wider. So just popping them in like that, as you can see. And then, going to cover it with about 6 inches of soil. So as it grows, it'll put out those vines. They're not truly vines, but they'll grow upwards and you'll see some green growth popping out here. When you start to see that green growth, you're going to want to add more soil to the top. So I'm only going to add 6 inches of soil. And then as that growth appears, I'll add more and more inches until I come all the way to the top of the pot. The reason you do that is you'll actually get a larger harvest, since each time you put more soil on it, there might be more offshoots, which could grow you more potatoes. Also, you want to make sure that light does not get onto your crop, since that can cause green potatoes, which are actually not good for us to eat. So you want them to be nice and deep in here. Just a little bit more. Hi, Lucy. Okay. There we go. So I'll, of course, water that in, since, as I mentioned earlier, watering gives you that nice soil contact. And then in 90 to 110 days, I'm going to dump this whole bucket out, pick through it, and have a great dinner. Another fast job to do in April that you will not regret later is pinching back your peas. At the allotment, we have a couple different varieties of peas, a sugar snap pea and a snow pea. And here, growing up these bamboo canes, we have sweet peas. This is a variety called Windsor, which has lovely, deep, rich burgundy ruffled flowers. Now, when your peas, whether they're sweet or the edible varieties, get to about 5 pairs of leaves tall, you're going to want to cut them back to about 1 or 2 sets of leaves. The reason you do that is at that point you'll encourage branching and you'll actually get more flowers or pea pods from your peas. So go ahead, take a look at your peas and then give them a little pinch back. The bonus is that you'll get lots of edible little shoots from your sugar snap peas that you can put on salads or have in your sandwiches. They're delicious. That's it for the month of April. This month I'll take care of a few other jobs, planting out additional vegetables, potting some lilies up for a late summer display, and I'll feed all my strawberry plants with kelp to help them fruit later in the season. Go out and enjoy springtime. We are at its peak and the world is lush with blossom. Eat dinner outside. Take a break from the computer, even if that just means walking outside for a moment to start to feel the earth warm up. The next time we meet in May, we'll be closer to the solstice than anything else, having passed through the halfway point between spring and summer. And I will see you then.